What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about my early thoughts on Assassin's Creed Shadows. I've put about 10 hours in the game so far, and I honestly feel like I got a good pulse of not only the game, but also how I kind of feel, obviously, up until this point. So, I want to start off this video by thanking Ubisoft. They did give me a code. They gave it to me March 18th. So, they gave it, the creator kind of Wave 2 out. And I do appreciate it, and it's not going to stop me from saying positive things. It's not going to stop me from saying negative things. I know there's been quite a lot of talk, hasn't there, been on Assassin's Creed. But look, at the end of the day, if we're just talking about the actual substance, just talking about the game itself, this is a solid game, and I don't really know if it's anything more than a solid game. I don't really know if it's anything less. In fact, let me stop saying that I think or things like that. This is just how I feel. So far, having played this game, I mean, I've said it before, these newer age AC games just haven't really ever gotten me. I did play Origins all the way through, and I actually did enjoy Origins. That's probably my favorite since that era began. I played Mirage, and I played Mirage all the way through. Odyssey and Valhalla were just too big for me. Didn't put a lot of hours into either of those. With this game, I do feel a sense of purpose to a degree. I feel a sense of like, okay, I'm going through the motions, and it really does feel like I'm going through the motions, but I'm also having an okay amount of fun. And so that's going to be a lot of what you hear, in this video. Let me try to point out some specifics, and let's see if you guys can understand kind of how I'm feeling here. So one thing I do want to shout out in terms of a massive positive, and probably the biggest positive of this entire game, is the world. The world is so beautiful. The world here does look magnificent. It really, really does. It looks so beautiful from the wind, and it really seems like it's always windy in this game, and maybe they're just doing it as a flex because you see everything kind of moving with the wind. But man, no, it's a pretty game. It really is. Going from point A to point B. A lot of the cutscenes in this game are very, very pretty. There are times where there'll be there's kind of levels to the cutscenes, and kind of the lower level cutscenes don't look so great, especially with the rest of the game, because the rest of the game just looks so good. So I want to shout that out because that's a lot of people going into the environment and the design and all that stuff. And I'm talking about whether it's the grass or whether it's these far out distance things when you're looking at like the eagle points and it is just spinning around. I mean, it is so nice to look at, far away. But also, when you're just walking up on a random village or random settlement, the game, I'd say 95% of the time, really does look like one of the better ones. I'm seeing reports and stuff on social media that, PS5 Pro and basically like what this game can be pushed to do can look even better than even what I'm seeing. So that's a huge thing because, you're going to be looking at the game quite often, I think. So, I want to give them praise because that's the thing I think they nailed more than anything else. I'll also say, the combat, it's not my favorite. I would say the visuals are top tier, and then everything else now kind of falls in this middle category. The combat I am actually having more fun with than I have of any of the other new age Assassin's Creed games, but I will say I'm not having the most amount of fun. It is getting repetitive. It feels like you're going through the motions quite often, and while I do like the brutality, I do like, again, like the animations. Naoe moves really, really cool. I want to talk about her in a second, but the combat is overall, I guess I would lean towards fun but repetitive. And you could really kind of take that mindset and apply it to pretty much anything else because, one thing I was talking about in a live stream I did on this game, a lot of it does feel like you're going through the motions. So when you're going and you're, attacking a castle and you're going through the castle and you're just kind of doing like the checklist things, right? Kill 3 elite enemies and then loot like the big loot box. It just feels like so much of this game is still that standard kind of formula where it isn't as big, or at least it doesn't feel as big, but then it kind of traps you because you look at the world and you say, okay, big world, oh, but okay, everything's kind of centralized, right? You look at these eagle points and you look at these castles, but everything starts to repeat, and then you can kind of find smaller settlements in between. So the world starts to, I would say, open up, and then you realize, okay, I'm going to be doing a lot of the exact same thing over and over and over. And again, this is where I kind of just land on solid. So many of the things in this game are solid or they're fine, whatever you want. I don't give scores, but I mean literally average. 5 out of 10, if 5 out of 10 is your average. It's not bad. It's not good. It's kind of right in the middle because you just end up doing so much of the same stuff over and over. It's clear what they're trying to go for. It's clear that there is some Ghost of Tsushima, blood into this. It's clear that there's even some like Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War. You can walk up across, like 10 different guards, right, in this little small zone in this town, and all of a sudden the camera will do this interesting spin around, and it'll lock on like the elite enemy, which is literally like, Shadow of Mordor and War, when you find, one of the elites, one of the war chiefs or captains, and it'll kind of pause the game and show you, oh shoot, you just walked up across an elite enemy. This game does it too. So, I mean, there's elements of like other games out there, right? And it comes together in a game that's fine. Like, it's fine to fight enemies. It's fine to go after like the elite targets. You end up doing pretty much the exact same thing every time. One thing I noticed, I was, again, saying in the live stream, when it comes to these castles and stuff, that's something that I just think is too repetitive for me. Again, it's the same kind of formula. Just kill some elite enemies, loot the box, and then, you're done with the castle. But like, so far, 10 hours in, all of the castles are the exact same. They're all built, like their level design is the exact same thing, and then you just multiply it by how many castles there are. The Eagle Points, they're one of 3 structures, and I think it's been this way for a while. Again, like, I haven't gone too deep in AC in a while, but, you think about back in the day, and it was all very, historical type stuff. You'd be climbing very historical, monuments and things. Nowadays, specifically in Shadows, I can at least speak from my experience here, so far, all the Eagle Points are trees, and they're the exact same style. Like, you climb up them the exact same way. The castles, in terms of going through and doing the same repetitive, kind of side activity there, well, at the end of the day, you're also going to go up to an Eagle Point, and that's the exact same thing for all of these castles as well. So, again, there's nothing terrible about it. It's just, if you do it one time, and that's really what this game is. You do something once or twice, and it's fun, and then it's like, okay, well, why don't you do it like 30, 40, 50 times? And it doesn't necessarily make it terrible, but it just makes it, okay, well, I'm just going through the motions. Okay, now enough about that. I want to focus on a couple other, rapid fire things before I forget. One thing I do want to shout out in a very negative way is the voice work. I actually think the voice work is quite terrible. This is something that I've seen clips online of like later portions in the games, but even my own experience, like the English voice acting is just not up to snuff. I actually did put on Japanese, and I will tell you the Japanese voice is much, much better. It's really, again, this is kind of a game that you can kind of go through the motions. You don't have to think about it too much. It can very much be played, I think, in the background, and that's oftentimes what I'm doing. When I'm doing a lot of these cleanup activities or exercises, I'm listening to something, somewhere else, not even in the game. But when I have been listening to the voice work, the voice work is not good. There are people that are not as bad. Like, there is some terrible voice work, English, okay, in this game. Then there's some like okay ones, but then if you play it in Japanese, then it kind of just, dissolves the entire thing. So that's something I kind of wanted to shout out in terms of a negative. The story, I mentioned side stuff. If we're talking like story and then like side story or side quest, well, again, there's a lot of repetition there. But one thing I will say for the side quest, at least early on, I just started exploring. I've played 10 hours of this game, and I can tell you for a fact, 10 hours, 9 hours and 50 minutes have been with Naoe. That's it. I've played as Yusuke for 10 minutes. Like, the first time they let me play as him, and that was it. So this really is Naoe's game, at least so far. I think you can go back and forth. I understand you can go back and forth at some point, but I'm just exploring. I'm just going out and, like, doing stuff. So I'm literally have played 96% of this game, as Naoe. And so when I talk about side quest, main quest, by the way, I'm just talking about her. But, the side stuff, there are some actually insanely in-depth side missions. It all kind of revolves around you finding meditation points around the world, and you'll do like the quick mini game, and then so what I've done so far is I've done like 4 or 5 of them, and some of them will be very, very deep. Some of them will be not so deep, but I will say that's a positive. But I feel like they must be limited because I've done 4 or 5, and then I found another meditation point, which would normally bring me to the side story and like do like an entire cutscene and just a side quest in general. It just gave me a mastery point. So I imagine there's limited amounts of these, in the entire game. I don't really know how it works, but for what they did did do when there were like meaningful side quests, they are meaningful. Main stuff, I saw a lot of people talking about how this is just very run of the mill. So far, it's been run of the mill, but I mean 10 hours, and again, I've largely done. I've 100%ed like the areas that they've given me to 100%. That's really where I've spent so much of the time. So I've tried to get the mechanics and the stealth and the fighting and exploration, stuff like that. Not so much the story. The story's, again, fine. Shocker. It's not good. It's not terrible. It's kind of right in the middle, at least for what I've played so far, which granted is not a lot. And so, I mentioned the fighting in terms of the stealth and, like assassination, like literal assassinations. Again, there's a repetition there. There's something kind of familiar about it in a good way. I don't know if you'll ever 100% get bored going around a castle and, stealth assassinating, 50 people. Yet again, when they make you do it over and over again, okay, maybe it could get a little bit boring. But, there's always going to be something rather special. And, to highlight some of the newer stuff, I know a lot was put on some of those higher difficulties. I tried to play, I played like 3 hours of this game on the hardest difficulty of both, fighting and stealth. And the fighting, I do think I could get away with. I actually ended up going like medium on both of those eventually. But the fighting, again, like I think it's solid enough I could probably push it and challenge myself. The stealth one is tough because I can appreciate that they're doing a lot of like the proning stuff. I love that. Again, I mentioned earlier, Naoe moves in amazing ways. I mean, she is a really, while again, maybe not the greatest character, voice work, but in terms of her movement and how she fights and just all the animations, she's fantastic. I mean, I love those freaking backflips. I love her parkour, just kind of in general. I think she's really cool. And like, her going prone, her sliding into it, her crawling, in the grass, really cool. That's a pretty big element of this game. Using fire as light or extinguishing it, like that's a big part of it too. I would just say, again, in terms of those 3 hours, I was playing it on the hardest stealth difficulty. I mean, enemies will see you for literally any reason. You could be high above and they'll still, which they do warn you about, like that's the main difference. It's fine, but I do feel like the game wants you, at least it wants me, to stay, above their sight line. And then when they can see me anyway, then it's like, okay, well, it actually was too difficult. It was actually, there's so many enemies in a base, and I try to use like going above them as like my main tactic. When they can see me within the first 10 seconds, and then I end up just fighting the whole time, I had to tune that down just because, I didn't want to deal with it, I guess. But, again, I guess appreciation that they're trying. The game does feel like an evolution in some ways. The game does feel like it's moving forward the franchise. And I will say, as I said in the beginning, in terms of these newer games, I am overall enjoying myself. I'm probably enjoying it somewhat similarly to Origins. Like I haven't quit it yet. So, I mean, Odyssey, Valhalla, Mirage, I went all the way through. Like I said, Origins, I did. It's fine. I mean, I keep saying it, but I really want to stress that. I think it's a fine game beyond all the controversy, beyond all that stuff, which we're not going to get into in this specific video. I've already done it, in other ones, but I think the game overall is solid. Now, what does solid mean to you? I mean, I had a lot of people asking me. Solid to me is not $70. Solid to me is doing the Ubisoft Premium, right, the subscription service. Solid is getting this game for 30, 40, 50 bucks. I mean, I think, if you're into this, you're going to be into this, and it's going to give you 50, 60, 70 hours of content. It's just what kind of content. And for me, it's content that, like I said, I think I can do it probably, but I definitely need to have something else on in the background, especially with like the cleaning up type stuff. There might be enough diversity in like the main stuff, but once you get deep, once you say, okay, what makes this game 60, 70 hours, it still ultimately is fluff. And, I talk a lot about that. I talked a lot about that leading into this game. I'm happy that, it's been reported that it's not as long as Odyssey and Valhalla, but it does suffer some of the same fate, or it feels familiar, definitely in a certain way, where it's like you feel like you're just going through the motions. A lot of this game, in fact, most of this game, feels like you've already played a game like this. I think like Mr. Matty Plays did a video title like that. I would maybe steal that if he didn't already have it. But no, I mean, like that's a pretty good example, or that's a pretty good explanation of what this game is. It doesn't make it bad. It also doesn't make it, I think, like a game of the year, but it's like, have you played a game like Shadows before? You definitely have. Like 100% you have. That's okay. That's okay if you want it to be okay, right? If you don't want it to be okay, you say, okay, I want an original, an experience that is really going to push it. It's almost going to feel foreign to me that they're doing these things. It's not going to give you that. You've definitely played games like this before. In fact, all these Assassin's Creed games are roughly close, but you've definitely had elements, any element that they can think of in this game, you've definitely played it before. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.